Well, look at that. 1 second, everyone. Let me go pull it back up again and just shut down on me for no reason. Sometimes it does that. I don't really know why. Let me get to that map again real quick, though. Day 52. That is the correct day. All right. Welcome back to the stream, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and today we're going to be talking about the previous 24 hours of news on Day 52 in the war in Ukraine. Once again, I have to say this, of course, often. The Ukrainians weren't expected to survive longer than 48 hours or so, but nonetheless, we are here on Day 52, and we're watching the Ukrainians still hold the eastern side of the country incredibly well. There will be some very pressing news that we will cover today in the area. It looks like a counterattack is imminent, so stick around and we'll get to that news in a bit. But nonetheless, we're going to go over tonight's schedule, starting off actually in Moscow once more, because we'll be talking about the threats that they've made to the United States, and also that will lead us to pretty much all the international news today, as we will be going to the Czech Republic to talk about the threats that they have now extended to the rest of the Western world in terms of what they said to the Czechs today. We will then be moving down into the Kyiv area and cover the news that occurred in Kyiv, and we'll also be covering the location unknowns in the same little group along with the Moscow and international news. We'll then pause to take some questions, about 3 to 5 from the chat. We'll then move on to the Kharkiv area and also the Donbas in general. We will then pause to take some more questions, and then we'll cover the Mariupol news, the southern front news really, and then we'll wrap it up with the news in Romania and also near Lviv. So, with that, let's get to the topic of today's thumbnail, which is the Russians are threatening the United States directly. This little link here pretty much just describes what they said, but yesterday, they said very late on in the day, so unfortunately I didn't put it in the stream last night, but they said that there would be unpredictable results if the United States was to continue their support to Ukraine. As of now, we are still continuing our support to Ukraine, so it looks like their threats have fallen on deaf ears. Some of y'all asked about that last night, and it is something interesting because they are now extending those threats beyond the U.S., which they've threatened us before early on in the war, about 2 weeks in. They've now extended those threats in a way to the Czech Republic, as today they said that the Czechs must ask Russia for permission before they send arms into Ukraine. Of course, that, if they asked the Russians for permission, the Russians would obviously say no. But still, that's showing that the Russians are actually starting to try and pick on the rest of the countries within continental Europe, and it sounds like they're having none of it. So that's incredibly good to know. That the West is not really listening or heeding the Russian warnings, because I think they're really full of hot air. And to move on from that, we've actually seen a change in direction, I guess you could say, for the people who are actually kind of like running the state TV. Now they've said today, which was very odd, that their actual objectives inside of Ukraine have been completed and the denazification will be left up to the Ukrainian government. So I'm just going to let y'all see that, because that is a slight change in narrative compared to what we've been seeing in prior days. Unfortunately, this has been removed by the mod, so we'll have to go straight to Twitter to watch it. So here we go. Let me put that up on screen. And hopefully y'all can hear this, but I'm just going to let the video run. And if y'all cannot see the subtitles down there, I will read them all for y'all. So this guy said, let the Ukrainians do the denazification on their own. And they said we can't do it for them. And now this guy is talking about, do we need to get into another Afghanistan, but even worse. So it sounds like, I don't know if he's just like the, because here in the United States, it's kind of like this as well on news channels like CNN and Fox always has that one outlier that they put in their group to step up whenever they have their little group panel opinion pieces that I can't stand. But anyways, they always put that guy in there, and he's just there to stir up the trouble and have people all hating on him as like the public enemy. So I don't know if this guy is serving that purpose or if that's reflective of the entire panel.
Хватит мы вот это сам. Армия выполнила задачу. Пусть работают дипломаты, какие-то другие структуры и решает эти задачи. Армия, я еще раз говорю, 101 раз, не может быть инструментом решения всех задач.
And so now it just loops. But you can see there that this guy at least was showing that the Russians may be trying to change the narrative on TV little by little, and this may be the first introduction of that they're doing, so that way if the war continues to go really bad for them, they can say that they completed their objectives. I'm assuming that they're saying that because there's been a decent amount of progress, it seems, in the Russian advance in Mariupol, and so, as far as destroying the Azov, which is one of their main symbols of, I guess you could say, fascist ideology in Ukraine, if they're able to wipe them out in Mariupol, then I guess they can say in some way, although it really wouldn't make sense based off of what they originally said, that they achieved their objectives and then they might leave. I'm not entirely sure. But anyways, we're now going to move on to the news in Kyiv, where today we've seen a very unfortunate sight. Here in this video, well, actually this is just a picture, is an idea of how many civilians have been killed in Irpin as this large cemetery with just a massive graves have been created inside of the city. It's unfortunate to think about because this is just a huge amount of people. This looks like one of the military cemeteries in France for the U.S. soldiers that died in World War I. And it's just insane to think that this many poor souls have died in the fighting in this war. So, there's really not much to add. This really is what it is. And I just hate it. It's terrible. And I hope that the Ukrainians are able to get the Russians who are accountable for causing all of these civilian deaths and hold them for their crimes and make sure that they face justice. So we're now going to move on out of the Irpin area and into Kyiv, because on a good note, we've seen that President Zelensky has been awarding the heroes of the Ukrainian front lines in this video today. So I'm just going to let y'all watch this in its entirety. It's pretty neat. He's addressing the troops who will be awarded. We see the first award citation. Very nice. I'm glad that they do take time, as most armies do. It's not really out of the norm to recognize the heroes and people who have done extraordinary effort on the front lines. It is, of course, something that's common in wars, but we don't really see a lot of videos of that on the Ukrainian side, and so this is one of the few examples, and I'm happy to see that they do recognize the Ukrainian soldiers, although I do believe that most of these Ukrainian soldiers find it an honor to just defend their land and don't really care about the medals involved. I think their goals are higher than just medal chasing and getting a ribbon or something, and they're actually defending their country. But nonetheless, it's still wonderful to see that the Ukrainian government does recognize extraordinary soldiers doing extraordinary things. So I'm going to let the video continue.
Капітан Грищук.
Дякую за службу.
Служу українському народу. Полковник Капітанчук.
Дякую.
Служу українському народу.
Дякую.
Майор Орден.
Денис. Дякую за службу.
Служу українському народу.
Дуже дякую.
Майор Єресь.
Денисе, радий бачити.
As we see more awards being handed out.
Дуже дякую.
Полковник КВТ.
Ірина, вітаю вас.
Служу українському народу.
Дуже дякую.
Майор Куменко.
Віталій.
That's a soft-spoken guy right there. Like, let me go back and listen to that again. He sounded, honestly, he looks like a grown man, obviously, but he sounds kind of like a a teenager, around like 18 years old or so. But still, I mean, like, this guy must have done something incredibly good to be awarded. And so, regardless of his voice, that man has the heart of a full-grown, strong, fighting Ukrainian man. So let's run back and listen to that again.
Яркоменко.
Віталій, дякую за службу.
Служу українському народу.
Дуже дякую.
Полковник Косієнко.
Андрій Васильович, дякую. Полковник Чубічка. Сергій Сергійович, дуже дякую.
Служу українському народу.
Дякую. Ще раз повторюю, що, наприклад, Дениса бачу я зранку і ввечері. І радий познайомитись ближче. Всім бажаю здоров'я.
Those are some very pretty medals. I'm not exactly sure about the actual awards and what they mean. Hopefully there's a Ukrainian award and medal expert down in the comments that can kind of describe what some of these medals are. We can actually see a vast array. We can see a blue cross of some kind. But nonetheless, it is incredibly good to know that every single person in the Ukrainian military, man, woman, young, old, are all doing their part to defend the country. And we can see that in this award ceremony today that they held, is that everyone in the country, civilian, soldier, and everyone in between, is doing their part. And it's a good thing to know that the morale is still incredibly high. And I'm sure that these kinds of events make sure that morale does stay high and will continue to do so. Finally, we've gotten proof today of the missile attacks in Kyiv on video, as we've seen that there has been some damage from a missile attack in the town of Brovary, right on the outskirts of Kyiv. It's really something of a suburb, but nonetheless, here's the video of that damage, and I'm just going to let y'all see it. It speaks for itself.
Вот это под броварами, блядь, ёбнули, блядь.
I'm not really sure how many people were wounded or killed. I'm assuming that there were a decent amount of people wounded and killed, probably at least 5. But then again, that is entirely an assumption. It did hit in a residential area, and usually when we see some kind of missile attack that is in a residential area, there is at least a score of people who were killed and wounded in it. So I hate to see that once more. It's kind of reminiscent. It reminds me a lot of the opening week or two of the war, when the Russians began to start doing the missile bombardments, and it was kind of taking the world by surprise and shock that the Russians would directly attack civilians like this. And it's not as shocking as it was then, because we've seen it happen before, but we have had a bit of a quiet period in terms of the direct civilian attacks, at least in Kharkiv and Kyiv. But now it looks like after the sinking of the Moskva, the Russians are pretty much trying to take this out directly on the civilians, which I just hate to see. But nonetheless, we're now going to move on outside of the Kyiv area, and we're going to get to the location unknown news, because we have had some whopping good news today. First off, we've actually been able to get a account of the current Russian losses according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense here in a sweet little infographic. We haven't seen a lot of these, and this is the first time I've seen one that they've actually put together that's incredibly good looking. So let's go through what they say they've destroyed as far as today. First off, they have destroyed 163 Russian aircraft. They have destroyed 145 helicopters, with an additional 1 helicopter being shot down today. They have destroyed 762 tanks. That is around, I would say, I think 6 to 6.5%, if I was to take a rough calculation of their tank force on paper. I think in their real life tank force, this would be close to around 10% to 15% of their actual operating tank force that isn't in some kind of reserve rotting away. We can also see that they've destroyed 1,982 armored cars, it seems, according to the infographic. An additional 12 of them have been destroyed just today alone. They've destroyed 66 anti-aircraft defense systems. This one right here looks like some kind of OSA, but nonetheless an incredibly good number. We haven't seen them destroy any more today, but that number is, of course, a decent number. We know that the usual anti-air defense system costs around $15 million, at least as the ones the Russians produce. And so if we were to do some quick math there, I pulled a Mike Tyson and said math instead of math, but let me do that real quick. $15 million, we'll just say that's the average cost, times 66, they've lost $990 million alone in anti-aircraft defense systems. So that gives you an idea of the actual monetary losses this is starting to figure up into. We've seen 125 MLRSs be destroyed. We're seeing here in the picture that there is a grad, but we know that a few tornadoes and a couple of smirches have also been destroyed as well, with an additional 3 being destroyed just today. 1,458 vehicles have been destroyed. These appear, according to the infographic, to be the supply trucks. 15 extra ones have been destroyed today. Just to give you context, we're going to do a little bit of number crunching real quick. The initial number of Russian logistical vehicles that they went into the war with was 4,000. So if we take that number right there, 1,458, and divide it by their initial force of vehicles that they entered the country with, that means that 36% of their logistical forces have been destroyed over the course of this war, at least in the normal truck arena. So that is massive. That cannot be understated how large that is. That is near 40% of the vehicles that they entered the war with, you know, in terms of their logistics and supply, have been completely destroyed. So to put that into context for everyone who wasn't here a while ago, the Russians with 4,000 supply trucks were only able to supply at 100% efficiency, if everything operated properly, 62% of their initial invasion force of 220,000 troops. So with around 36% of that force, the logistical force, now being completely destroyed, we could probably assume that that number, you know, at 100% efficiency is going to be much lower, somewhere around 40%, maybe even in the 30% area. So we can get the idea that the Russians, and this may be why the front line has become so quiet and we don't really get a lot of news about mass Russian offensives anymore on the front lines. It's just that their logistical capacity has been destroyed to the point that that is no longer possible. We've seen that 76 fuel trucks have been destroyed, an incredibly good number. I'm not exactly sure how many fuel trucks they had. I just know that in total, all of their logistical vehicles and their logistical, I believe, brigades, totaled 4,000 trucks. So I think that also included the fuel trucks as well, but we don't actually have a breakdown of that figure. We've also seen that 26 special equipment vehicles have been destroyed. In this picture, it looks like there's some kind of bridge laying tank, but then again, that can include all kinds of vehicles. We're going to move on from that and see that they've destroyed some mobile short-range ballistic missile systems. They've destroyed 4 of them. So these could be anything from Tachka launchers to, I believe that we also saw some Caliber launchers earlier. That could be any of those. We've seen that they've destroyed 371, an additional 5 today. Artillery pieces, that is an incredibly good number. They've also destroyed 138 drones on the from the Russian side, which is a number that I actually haven't heard before. And that's incredibly interesting to know that they're having a very high rate of success in shooting down the drones. That number is rapidly catching up to the actual number of aircraft they've shot down. And finally, we can see that the Ukrainians have destroyed 8 Russian ships, and we now know that that includes the Moskva. I don't know if they added that number onto this stat sheet the other day or not, but we do know that the Moskva will make that number 8, and if they haven't included that yet, it will make it 9. And that's probably the biggest ship that they've destroyed, and so it kind of makes up for the other 8 ships, or 7, and accounts for then some. Also, the grand number that we're looking at today of the amount of Russian troops that have been lost, well, killed over the course of this war, 20,100. That is nearly 10% of their initial invasion force has been straight up killed, and probably around 40,000 of them have been wounded and sent back to Russia. So, and you're probably wondering, where do I get that figure? It's a general rule of thumb that for every 1 combatant that is killed, there's usually 2 more that are wounded in some way, shape, or form. So if we go off of that and we add that together, 60,000 divided by 220,000, 27% of their initial invasion force has been incapacitated, at least in the frontline combatant roles, and they're probably having to try and replenish those numbers with forces from around the country, and that may be why we're seeing videos of trains bringing equipment west across Russia, is because they're trying to pull in reinforcements to replenish the forces that they've lost. But nonetheless, you can tell that the amount of Russian losses that they have suffered is staggering, and I don't think, honestly, they can keep this up for much longer. Maybe another month, But beyond that, I think they're going to start suffering a huge degree in terms of the actual equipment and forces that they can field. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainians using the Grad system, and we actually see them using it from inside the cap. We've seen this before with the Russians, but we haven't seen such a long and drawn-out video from either side, and so it's really interesting to see it from the Ukrainian perspective. And so without further ado, here's the video. But first, let me unmute that and get it all the way back to the start, so that way we can all get the best viewing experience, and here we go. You know what's interesting to me? This may be just because I'm not a expert with MLRS systems, but I thought that an MLRS would fire the rockets from the top, you know, like the top right, for example, and then move its way left across the launcher tubes and then go down to the next row. But as we can see here, while it's firing, they're really firing from just random tubes. I don't know if they have actual control over that, or if that's just randomly input, or if that is a select kind of input to make sure that they aren't, you know, messing with each other's flight path. But as you can see here, they're coming from totally different tubes from the launcher. Very interesting for me. I actually haven't never observed that.
Паша. Люкс. Слава Україні. Героям слава.
So now we can see them adjusting the launcher. It looks like they're trying to line it up behind the truck, probably trying to get it ready to move. Because once again, you don't want to keep artillery in the same spot after it fires. You want to fire it, pack it up, and then move it to another location, or counter battery fire could come in, and then that could start targeting your artillery and most likely destroy it. So you've always got to be very quick about firing artillery, and that's something you really don't have to be in the military to know. That's kind of a rule of thumb. Instead, you never want to do anything in the same place twice, because then people are going to get a little bit smart and figure out that you're there and then start shooting right at you. So as we can see, they're now, I think they're stowing this and getting it ready to move. And you can see that they're hurriedly trying to do it, which does tell us that they may be trying to get ready to move out to a new location. So now we can see they're getting back in the cab. Now what's interesting to me is that here on the dash, we don't see what we saw on the last grad video that we saw from inside the cab. The DNR was operating them, which is a pro-Russian country. It's the Donetsk People's Republic. And they had some kind of little box on the dashboard with a lever on it, and they kind of like, well, they just pulled the lever down each time they wanted to fire a rocket. So we don't see that in this one, at least as far as we've seen so far on the dash. So I wonder how they were firing those rockets in this grad, because apparently it has a little bit of a different setup with how the rockets are launched. But anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. So now we can see that this grad is on the way. So they did, in fact, stow the the rocket tube. I don't know what it's specifically called. I'm sure there's an exact terminology, but I never really get into that. But they stowed the rocket tubes, and now they're on the move. They're probably moving to the next pre-prepared location, or they're moving these further back behind the lines to then have them reloaded, and then move them back into a pre-prepared position to then fire the launchers again. As we can see, they are trying to haul it right now through this dirt field. And they were just being bounced around.
Нормально. Не дивишся на нас. Бойовим хрещенням, Микола! Наші ключі.
And they are literally hauling it right now. You can tell by how shaky this video is and how that guy's on the steering wheel. They are getting out of there. Actually, it looks like one of the MLRSs right in front of him didn't even stow the launcher. You can see here that it's still angled to the left and upwards. And so it looks like they were in such a hurry in that grad that they actually didn't stow it. They just got in the truck and were like, go. Because, you know, they don't want to get hit by counter battery fire. So, anyways, we're going to let the video continue. So now they've stopped. Now it looks like they did get out of the MLRS, and now they're going to try and stow the launcher. So I think, now that we saw that, I think they were just like, forget it, it's taking too long, go. And then they drove further down the way, so that way, if there was any counter battery fire, they would be kind of out of the catchment area, I guess you could say. And so then they could stow the piece as quickly as they could, and then keep on moving after that. So it was an incredibly interesting video to see. We actually saw the Ukrainians fire the MLRSs and then try and get the hell out of there. So that was a really interesting thing. Haven't seen that before, and so that's really cool to see how fast they try and pack the artillery pieces in a way and then move out. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next video where we can see, as you know, another Stugna attack. So I'm going to let y'all see this real quick. Apparently, this was the 501st Separate Marine Battalion that hit a Russian T-72 tank with a Stugna. As you can see, the Stugna is now on its way. You can see it in the camera there. Unfortunately, the footage is a little blurry. I apologize for that. But we should see a little puff of smoke here in a second. Any second now. And boom, they got it.
Yes.
Ну, попал.
You know, usually we hear a lot of cheering whenever anyone hits a tank. They literally just said east. And I found out that that actually means in Ukrainian, like, got it or did it or something similar to that. They're not actually saying yes as in the yes in English. It's actually like yes or something like that. But nonetheless, incredibly cool to see. They've once again knocked out another tank, and I'm sure that that was added to the tally of destroyed vehicles that we saw earlier on in the casualty report today. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see, of course, a Stugna attack. So I'm going to let y'all see that one real quick. Of course, it's much like the last one. It's just good to see, and I always like to show each individual Stugna attack. As you can see here, it's already hit the tank, and now they're filming it burning through the crosshair sights. But still, I like to show them all because it's good to try and document as many Russian vehicles that have been destroyed as possible. And so while they do get a little bit of a little repetitive, I do enjoy watching them because it is a little bit of a different situation each time, and it also does give us a bit of an accurate idea of the effect of how good Stugnas are being used right now. And so with that, that is the end of this video. And we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian artillery hitting Russian positions. We don't really know, you know, I'm not really trying to tie it all into a linear story mode or anything, but I wonder if this artillery strike is from the MLRS group that we saw previously. I doubt it, because it looks like it's a totally different time of day. But nonetheless, here's the video. So as we go through a little bit of a lengthy intro, we can now get to the video where you can see the artillery impacts hitting in the field. We can see a new one out there to the right side of the screen. Now we can see multiple amounts of strikes here in the center of the screen, right over here, which may suggest that the Russian forces that they're trying to hit are somewhere in this forest in a way. We can now see another barrage come in, and then it looks like we're probably going to see another really soon, because they zoomed in on that one spot. We can see what appears to be maybe a Russian vehicle right down there in the corner, right here, burning. So it looks like that may have been a direct enough hit to destroy the vehicle. And with that, that is actually the end of the video. The rest of the 16 seconds of it are just like the end card. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we're going to see Ukrainian staged push for the cameras. I've got to say, on this one, I looked at it, and there's no, like, this is kind of like falling under that, like, Chechen TikTok army kind of thing, you know, where you can tell they're shooting at nothing. But nonetheless, it was a pretty neat little idea that they came up with. Hopefully they're not trying to push this as actual combat footage, because you can't hear any enemy fire, and you can't even see the enemy, and they're, like, kind of in an open field on a road. But nonetheless, it was a very neat video with all the Ukrainian flags flying off of all the vehicles, and so I'm going to let y'all see the footage. Hopefully this isn't wasting too much ammo for him. Oh, forgot copyright music. But I can promise you, I watched this video 3 times over from start to finish, and there was no fire coming from up ahead. So unfortunately, I have to say, I don't really think this video is exactly true, per se. If it is, I'll correct that statement later on. But it's still very cool to see all the Ukrainian flags waving off of all the vehicles and seeing them push like that. It's just a neat little bit of cinematography in a way. Hopefully that doesn't become common, because then I'm going to have to start kind of giving it a bit of a bad rap, because it may be trying to paint an image that isn't necessarily true. But nonetheless, it was a cool video at the moment, and so we're just going to leave it at that and move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian sniper using a big gun, and I mean a big gun. This gun is a 14.5 by 114 millimeter magazine-fed rifle. You know, of course, all rifles are usually fed by a magazine nowadays, unless you have like a break open or something like that. But anyways, to give you the idea of how big 14.5 is, a Beretta 50 cal is 12.7. So this is actually a few millimeters larger in diameter. We're going to go to the actual Twitter video real quick, and here's the video of this guy using this mammoth gun. So now we can see him. I think he's maybe prepping for another shot.
Аккуратно дивись, не в'їбив стіночку, їбать.
I wonder how well the recoil is managed on a gun that size. Golly. That's something. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Then it just loops after that. But I gotta say, that is a massive gun. Let's see. This is how the Snipex Alligator. Let's see. Snipex Alligator. So that's the Snipex Alligator. It's got a maximum firing range of 7,000 meters, which is around 4 miles or so. So, pretty long range. Let's see here. The firearm blog. Wait, are these things for sale here in the United States? I don't think so. I would highly doubt that, actually. Nah, I don't think it is. Let's see if it is. For sale. Let's see about this one here. So, cancel. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like these are for sale. And anyways, I'm sure it'd probably be like $20,000 to buy one. But look at the size of that round. A 14.5 millimeter round. That is huge. I mean, like, that's getting... God, like, that's getting up into World War II anti-tank gun, or the anti-tank gun arena. But nonetheless, an impressive gun for sure. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see a destroyed engineering vehicle. As we can see, it really just kind of looks like a tractor with treads, of course. I'm not exactly sure what the classification of engineering vehicle this is, but it's still good to see that Russian equipment is being destroyed.
Кондоны, ёба. Чуть подкоптили.
Don't know exactly what took it out, but it's still impressive to see that the Ukrainians are destroying everything everywhere, and it looks like there's still no stopping them as far as how many vehicles they can destroy. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the last 2 bits of location unknown news, where we can see Porky Pig nearly kill a whole squad of Ukrainians as it almost ran on top of mines on the side of the road. Now this is something you can laugh at because no one got hurt, but that pig nearly did kill everyone, so let's check that out.
Його будемо ризать, ВВП, блядь.
As you can see, it's just traveling down the side of the road.
Погнали.
Ukrainians seem to be having a fun time talking to it.
Диви, що він міну
And now we can
летів,
see
блядь.
mines on the side of the road. And mines and a pig are a very bad combination because you can see the pig almost actually walks onto the mine. Right there. So that pig was nearly about to kill everyone. I don't know if it was a Russian spy or Moscow Mike. That may have actually been footage of Moscow Mike in the flesh, but nonetheless, we could see that the pig nearly killed everyone. So that was a bit of a weird video. We haven't seen anything like that before. So that was pretty interesting. And so finally, we're going to move on to the last bit of location unknown news today, where we've seen a list of Russian officers that have been killed. This goes through actually all of them. You can check this out. There's a link in the description below to this Day 52 map. And so you can actually click on this marker yourself and take a really good look at it if you'd like. Also, we have a Discord as well if you'd like to join the Discord community and chat it up with people in the live chat, because they actually hang out a lot in the Discord. So if you would like to do that as well, make sure to join it. But moving on from that, we can see here that they have killed 1 lieutenant general, 5 major generals, 15 colonels, 2 captains of the first rank, 26 lieutenant colonels, 2 captains of the second rank, 28 majors, 42 captains, 46 senior lieutenants, and 30 lieutenants. In the Russian army, once you get down into the lieutenant arena, you're really hitting like the sergeant level, but nonetheless, these are the figures that we can confirm. We've seen that they have captured 5 lieutenant colonels, 3 majors, 2 captains, and 4 lieutenants. They've also killed 1 warlord. I think they're talking about one of the Chechens there, and we've seen that they've wounded 2 major generals. And finally, it looks like, I don't know if this is saying that they've killed officers, 6 of them were heroes of Russia, and 31 of them got the Orders of Courage, but nonetheless, take that for what you will at the bottom of that. I'm not really sure how to interpret it, but nonetheless, these appear to be, as far as I can cross-reference, true statements about the lists and numbers of officers that have been killed. And so with that, we've covered all of the location unknown news, and so we're now about to start moving on down into Kharkiv and also the Donbas area in general. But before we do, we're going to take 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. First question up for the night we have is from Old Salty Squid, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. It says, Matt has a voice like deep mahogany. Well, thank you. That being said, do you think that Putin will actually use nukes? Could you use this donation for the pets of Ukraine? If not, put it towards the Sunday fundraiser. Keep up the great work, and Slava Ukraine.
Thank you very much for the support, and I will put it towards the Sunday fundraiser. And to answer your question, could you revisit that for me real quick, Matthew, to make sure I get it right?
He says, do you think that Putin will actually use nukes, and could you use the donation for the pets of Ukraine?
I'm not sure if the Sunday fundraiser will be for the pets of Ukraine, but we will put it towards the Sunday fundraiser nonetheless. But to answer the question about will Putin use nukes, I'm not entirely sure. You know, once again, it can go either way, but at this moment, I think they're just leaning on the threat of it, and I don't really think they're actually planning on executing that threat, because the thing is that if they manage to do that, it's not going to fare well for them. It's not like it's going to be like a nuclear onslaught that's one-sided and they win and destroy the Western world. They'll also destroy themselves in the process through the return fire of nukes that would be launched from pretty much every Western country that has some. So I don't think that they'll be using the nukes. But I thank you so much for the question and the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, Sylvia the Sockeye Salmon returns. S. Moore puts in a $15 donation and says, the ghost of Sylvia the Sockeye says, Ukraine needs to target military targets across line, and more frontline med kits are needed, please.
I do agree. We have seen that the Ukrainian frontline soldiers seem to be the most appreciative at the moment of the IFAC medical kits, and so I believe that it would be beneficial to send over as many of them as possible, because while we're focusing right now on most of the large ticket items like heavy artillery and such, it is still important to always focus on the smaller end things like medical kits and such things like that. So I do agree with you very much so that that is important to send over. And so I hope that answers the question. I think I may have missed a part of it. Hopefully Matthew will tell me while we're moving on. But with that, if I have covered everything in that question, we're going to move on to the next one.
Yeah, and just the main part of that question was basically, do you think Putin will use nukes? The rest was just about the, putting the funds toward the fundraiser.
I think you're actually talking about the one before that. We're talking about Sylvia the Sockeye Salmon.
Oh, yeah, you're right. My bad. But anyways, moving on to the next one, we have a $10 donation from XX Elite GPXX, who says, "Have you heard of Boots on the Ground reporter Patrick Lancaster? He's in Mariupol. Many people he interviews say Ukraine, in fact, was shelling the city, not the Russians. If so, what do you make of this?"
Can you tell me the name of that town again, real quick? Just so that way I can pull it up.
Mariupol.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I didn't catch that. I haven't heard of the Ukrainians shelling the town trying to get to the Russians, because as far as I know, the Russians are on the outskirts of the town. So unfortunately, I really can't comment on that at all. I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one because I've never heard that story, unfortunately, if that is true, or that may be some kind of rumor or something like that, but I'm not going to discredit it entirely. It may be true. It's just that I haven't heard about it. So unfortunately, I really can't comment on it, but I thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to one more question, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv and Donbas news.
And real quick, I want to recognize a $25 donation from Carol Dudas. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. It is very much appreciated. Next up, we have a $10 donation from BC Skyman, a longtime channel supporter, who says, "Viber Flash has great info straight from Ukraine. Many videos on there too. Civilians are still being killed daily as air raid sirens are still going off. It's very heartbreaking. Keep up the good work."
It very much is. It's very unfortunate that that kind of stuff is still happening and that civilians are being directly attacked by the Russians. It has been going on for an incredibly long time now, and it doesn't look like anything's going to change as long as this war keeps going. And that's just kind of the unfortunate fact of it, is that as long as this war keeps on going, there will be civilian suffering at the hands of the Russians. And so I hope that sooner rather than later this war will end and the Ukrainians will be able to manage to finally push the Russians mostly out of the country and secure some kind of peace agreement. And so with that being said, I hope I've addressed that statement. And with that, we're now going to move on to the Kharkiv news and also the news from the Donbas. So without further ado, we're going to start on the outside of Kharkiv with a pretty self-explanatory video. This is just a video of a Russian column moving in the Kharkiv region. Apparently they had helicopter cover, but nonetheless, here's the video. So you can see here the helicopters are, of course, flying over the convoy. This is actually something of a rarer sight from what we've seen. Usually the Russians don't cover their convoys with air support. Unfortunately, the video quality is low. I do apologize for that because it's in 1080, yet it looks like it's in 240. But here we can see Kamaz's moving down the road, as well as T-72Bs. And also some Russian armored vehicles. Once again, Mi-8s or Mi-17s flying over the convoy, I guess screening them. So I don't know what we're supposed to be really getting out of that part of the footage. But nonetheless, it looks like there's some kind of Russian van, it looks like, and they're waving a flag at the helicopter. I'm not exactly sure why. But nonetheless, that is the end of the video. Not really much to add there, so we're now going to move on into the city of Kharkiv itself, where we have seen that the Russians have begun direct attacks on the city center itself, and it looks like they're trying to inflict as much damage on the civilian population once more, because they're not attacking military targets anymore, they're once again attacking civilians directly. More evidence of war crimes that I think should be looked into heavily, so I'm going to let y'all just see the evidence of this real quick. As we can see here, more damage from today's attack alone. As you can just see, the damage is unbelievable. Once again, it's very typical of what the Russians normally do, but it's still so sickening and gross to see that the Russians will just continue to do it without any regard for the civilians, and they're attacking them directly, which really means that they're attacking the civilians out of malice. It's almost like they're trying to kill off as many civilians as possible. So now we can see another video that's been stabilized, showing the damage inside of Kharkiv. As you can see, it looks like this entire city block has been pretty much leveled. Just debris strewn about. Looks like this walkway above the street has nearly been destroyed. And so now you can see another picture of the damage, and with that, that's the end of the video. And it's once again unfortunate to see that this kind of damage continues to occur in Kharkiv. But I hope that y'all do get a decent bit out of it, including myself, because I think that this is just terrible to see. And so with that, we're actually going to move on to the next video, which actually shows that there was shelling in the city yesterday, but for some reason, the footage wasn't uploaded yesterday, it was uploaded today. But nonetheless, here's the footage of that. As you can see, this person walked off the street right in time, I'm guessing, to not be hit by the shrapnel from this incoming rocket that hit dead center of the street. So hopefully they were lucky and they didn't get hit by any of the shrapnel whatsoever, but that's the end of that video. And we're now going to move on to the next one, where we can see, let's see, let me make sure, more damage from the shelling. I'm actually trying to keep these in an order to convey the story that's going on inside of Kharkiv. But anyways, we can see more damage from the shelling here in this video on another side of the town near the KFC. So I know there's probably a lot of KFCs in Kharkiv, but it's really interesting to see that there's any KFCs in general. So you can see fires raging throughout the street, pretty much, around the buildings. Looks like most of the buildings have had their windows blown out. I'm not really sure if that's from previously or from this direct missile attack. But you can see that the damage has, of course, been pretty severe, much like it was in the initial onset of the war.
Вот эту аптеку, что мы. Машины, блядь, человек лежит. Короче, пиздец. Походу есть убитые.
Алло.
And now it looks like it's really going over the footage we saw previously. It is, actually. So we're going to cut that video short, but nonetheless, you can see that the city has been shelled a pretty decent amount once more, and debris and rubble is now strewn about the streets again, and the civilians, of course, will be trying to clean it up as best as possible. You can see the overall damage on the city today in this view of morning in Kharkiv, where you can see all the smoke billowing out of the areas that have been hit inside the city. So here's that video. You can see what looks like 2 areas where missiles or rocket attacks have hit, and also an additional 2 or more areas over here on the side that are smoldering lightly, but not as heavily as the other 2 missile attacks that we saw on the other side of the city. With that, we're finally going to get to the last bit of news in Kharkiv, where we've actually seen that some civilians just do not care. There are soldiers from the Ukrainian military inside of Kharkiv, and they were actually laughing at how nonchalant the people have become inside the city as, you know, pretty much rocket and artillery attacks persist. They just continue to go about their daily lives. So check out this video. It's a pretty interesting one.
Что вы понимали? Долго-то нам со всего человека можно. А местный житель пиздует, воду несет.
Ебать, ну отмороженная нахуй на это. Салтовка, вам респект, у вас есть, конечно, ебанутая наглуха. Покажи этого, блядь, супер деда, блядь.
So you can see that they're actually getting a pretty good laugh out of it.
Ебашут. Похуй.
Вообще, похую.
As you can see, there they are over there.
И не ебет его, блядь, ничего. Что вы там прячетесь?
Говорит, лохи, блядь. Лохи, говорит, блядь, прячутся они.
Похую.
Вообще, тупо похую.
Блядь.
And so with that, that's the end of that video. And I also like, because I looked in the chat real quick, I'd also like to address a quick comment where someone said that the title is a little clickbaity. Actually, if you go watch the first few minutes of the stream, like after the intro card rolled, you'll see that I talk exactly about what's in the thumbnail. But nonetheless, we're now going to move on outside of the city of Kharkiv, where we've actually gotten some news that may show that the battle plans that I laid out previously down here near the Severodonetsk and Slavyansk area may turn out to be accurate, as it appears that the Russians are going for the larger of the two encirclements that have been proposed as 22 battalion tactical groups. As you can see here, you can also click on this link for verification of that information. It appears that they've amassed in the city of Izyum, and they may begin a directly southwards attack down the, let me make sure I get the name right, the M03 towards Slavyansk, and they may begin an encirclement of the Ukrainians if possible. We don't know if they, how much success they'll face, but as far as we know, it's looking like they will be trying and counterattack in this area incredibly soon. We're now going to move on to the Severodonetsk area, where we can see, once again, much like we saw in Izyum, graves for the dead. I believe, I'm not entirely sure whose graves these are. These, according to the title, are for dead Russian soldiers that have been buried on Ukrainian soil because the Russians aren't taking care of the dead. But nonetheless, here's the video of all the graves.
The cemetery here is on the edge of Severodonetsk. You can hear the explosions in the background. All of these are new graves. We can't stay too long here because it's not terribly safe, but yeah, as you can see, this is the result of the war. All these are new graves from the 24th of February. And you can see, and here you have new ones, ready for whoever comes next. I'm told here that almost every day there are new burials. Anyway, let's go.
So that's the end of that video. Unfortunately, it does give you an idea of the human loss in the war, as, you know, the bodies are all pretty much buried in the same field, and you can actually see from all the markers how many people have died in that one area, and it's very unfortunate. And I hate that this war continues, but hopefully the Ukrainians can hold their ground and bring this war to a swift end, hopefully sooner rather than later. With that, we've actually covered all of the Kharkiv news from the Kharkiv and Donbas area. And so with that, we're going to move on to 3 to 5 more questions from the chat, and then we're going to cover the Mariupol news along with the Southern Front news, and then the international news that we haven't touched on, as well as the news from around the rest of Ukraine. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so up next we have a $30 donation from Turbo B18C1, who says, it is with deep sadness that I inform you that Moscow Mike, aka Moscow Michaela, took his own life today after his beloved bathtub battleship, the Moscow, was sank. May he rest in pieces.
Well, thank you for the joke. I also hit on Moscow Mike earlier with the pig near the mines, but thank you very much for the support, and it is unfortunate to hear that Moscow Mike has finally decided that it's just been too much for him to bear, and that he's got to, you know, sleep with the fishes in a way as well. So I thank you so much for the support. Like the joke, it was a pretty funny one. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $10 donation from Frost Bright Productions, who says, Slava Ukraine, Enforcer Matt and the Enforcer, have you guys been able to compare the losses from this war to other past wars? Which war comes close to these stats, and what made it that way?
Unfortunately, there's not really a war that has come close to, well, this war hasn't come close to the stats of other wars, like the Finnish Winter War and also the war in Afghanistan. The figures aren't exactly comparable, but in the actual percentage of dead on the Ukrainian side versus the Russian side, which we actually got a figure for today. Zelensky said around 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed over the course of this war. That figure may be doctored a little bit. It may be lower than their actual number. But nonetheless, it is sounding very comparable to the Winter War, where the Finnish lost, I believe, 29,000 soldiers, and in return killed around 400,000 Soviet soldiers over the course of the war. So it sounds like the kill to death ratio, which is something that was used a lot in Vietnam, is actually incredibly in Ukraine's favor right now, which shows that as far as a defensive war is going, they are winning it because they're inflicting more losses on the Russians than the Russians are inflicting on them. So I hope that answers the question in the best way possible. Unfortunately, it's not really comparable to any other war yet, but I do thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $10 donation from Susan Hadley, USAF vet, who says, "Keep up the great work you're doing. Seeing your video feedback is much more informative than the news is releasing. Thank you, and God bless Ukraine."
And I thank you so much for the support, Susan. I know that you actually have been on the Discord before, and it's good to see that you are supporting the channel here in the live chat. And so I thank you so much, and I do thank you for the high praise. I do try and make sure that the content we deliver is of as high quality as possible, and so it does mean a lot. So thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to our last question of this segment, and then we're going to cover the Mariupol news and also the Eastern Front news, as well as the remaining news around the world. And then we'll return to the questions once more. And so with that, what is the last question?
And the last question goes to Krister Patterson, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "If the cruiser Moskva carried nukes and the ship exploded the nukes, dirty bombs, and spreading radioactivity in the Black Sea, will increased radioactivity be detected?"
I don't think the nuclear weapons did explode. Usually nuclear weapons, I believe, have to go through an arming process to actually have the ability to explode. So I don't think they did. I think they went down with a ship and they're just resting at the bottom of the sea. Of course, corrosion can, I think, lead them to explode because the arming system may become faulty under those kind of circumstances. But nonetheless, I think the radiation would be picked up, of course, because radiation is actually kind of an easy thing to detect if you have the right kind of measuring equipment, as far as I've been able to collect from a little bit of research myself. So if they did explode, I think they would be detected. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And so with that, we're now going to move on into the Mariupol area, where we've actually had a lot of news today, which may be painting a picture that is a little unfortunate once again for the defenders of Mariupol, but nonetheless, we're going to start off with our first bit of news, where we can, of course, see our TikTok army on the outskirts of Mariupol playing for the camera. And so I'm going to let y'all see the footage real quick. And of course, they've got copyrighted music, so we're going to have to keep that muted. So as we can see, the guy is talking on the radio. Now they're going to show some firefighting footage where the guy pretty much just mag dumps as usual. Then we see some footage of them firing some kind of AT weapon. Now we see more footage of them firing AT weapons. So now we can see this guy. It looks like he's just mag dumping his light machine gun, probably a PKP. They love to mag dump. It looks good for a camera, but it's not really good for your supply lines, nor is it good for actual accuracy or effectiveness. We can now see another AT weapon being fired again, and this is all, from what we can tell, happening on the outskirts of Mariupol, which, as far as we know, the Ukrainian defenders are not even close to the outskirts of Mariupol anymore. Now we can see some footage of something over there. I'm not exactly sure what it was. Now we can see them firing AT weapon again. In the same spot. They just keep on firing from the same spot over and over, which tells you that the place is completely abandoned, because the Ukrainians would start shooting back at that exact spot if they were there. So now you can see them posing in front of a mirror and showing off, I guess, captured Ukrainian equipment. Now they're showing, I'm assuming, Ukrainian helmets. I'm not exactly sure. Once again, there's music playing over this, so we really can't even hear them. Yeah, it's Ukrainian stuff, apparently. It's got Ukrainian flags on it. I guess they're going to show the plate carrier now. unlike the Russians who actually put MacBooks in their plate carriers, the Ukrainians actually have body armor in there, which is a huge improvement, of course, over a MacBook. But it looks like a bullet may have pierced it. But what's odd is that there's no blood on anything, which, I don't know, kind of suggests that that may have not been entirely accurate to what actually happened. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news inside Mariupol, where we can see the Mariupol train station before the war, and now, apparently today, about 52 days into the war. So this is what the train station looked like before the war kicked off, and now this is what the train station looks like, completely destroyed. As you can see, the Russians aren't bringing any kind of liberation to the Ukrainian people, as they said. They're just bringing death and destruction and causing absolute mayhem in the meantime. So hopefully none of this is in vain, and the Ukrainians can manage to win this war. I believe they can. It looks like they have a decent possibility of winning it. And when I say win, don't take that as I mean they're going to march into Moscow and win the war that way. They're going to be able to hold their ground long enough that the Russians will be forced into a peace agreement, which is winning for them since it's a defensive war. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten, and we can see that Mariupol is, of course, in ruins. We've seen this a couple of times, but this is, of course, new drone footage, and so I like to show it. It does give us a up-to-date perspective on the destruction in the city. So you can see that these apartment blocks in particular have been destroyed to the point that you can't even recognize their original shape for the most part. Some of them actually look like two separate buildings, although they were at one point one in a whole entire original and intact building. So now we can see that they're flying around them a little bit more. As you see, the damage is just unbelievable. What's also an interesting thing about these buildings is that it looks like the central part of the buildings are the weakest parts, as far as we can see in terms of damage, because on both of these buildings, it was the central part of the building that collapsed, and it wasn't the external sides. Maybe the central part was hit the most by artillery fire, and that may have, artillery or cannon fire, and that may have led to the destruction of the center of these buildings, but nonetheless, it is an interesting observation. As you can see, entire apartments where people used to live just completely destroyed in that building. There's not even a semblance of them existing there anymore. They've completely collapsed into rubble on the ground. And with that, many lives have been destroyed, and many lives have been lost beyond that. And it's terrible to see. I hate to see this kind of stuff. But it's what needs to be seen. This is what the Russians are actually doing over there. It's just destroying entire cities with really no goal in mind at this point. So we can now see them flying through the building once more. I wish they'd actually show us some drone footage looking sideways into that building, so that way we can see the actual damage on a human scale, maybe some furniture or something like that. But nonetheless, you can also see that all the houses out here were destroyed completely, almost to their foundations. So that doesn't give you an idea of how badly destroyed Mariupol is in some areas. I don't know what will. Moving on to the rest of the city, we've seen, once again, drone footage. We've seen a decent amount of drone footage in Mariupol, but this came from the Ilyich Steelworks, and this was captured by a Czech Republic drone, apparently of a battle that was occurring there today, which does tell me, and does confirm, that the defenders of the city still hold this northern area that's marked up here. I don't know about the side near the port anymore, but we do know that this has been confirmed that they're at least holding something up here. And so with that, we're going to get on to the drone footage, which is right here. I'm going to let y'all see that real quick. And I'll have to mute it because there's copyrighted music. As you can see, some sort of explosion rocked the plant. Apparently, the thermal heat map on this system lights up anything that's hot as red, which is interesting to me. Usually it's just a grayscale. But now we can see some straight up camera footage of it, normal, camera footage. We can see an explosion rocket building down there at the bottom part of the screen. We can once again see another explosion. We don't know what exactly they're hitting. We can't really see any soldiers on the ground where these explosions are occurring. But right here, it looks like these may be some Azov defenders moving one of their wounded, although it is close to a Russian armored car, so I'm not entirely sure. So now we can see a tank on fire. I'm assuming, let me go back and look at that one just a little bit more. Try and get a better look at it. Gee, I can't tell if that's a Ukrainian tank or a Russian tank. But nonetheless, it was on fire and moving incredibly quickly. We can also see a destroyed armored personnel carrier and a trench get hit with some kind of explosives. We can now see someone wounded being dragged out of the trench. I'm not sure if these are... I think these may actually be the defenders of the plant. You could see the actual amount of hell they're going under to try and hold this city as best as possible. And you got to say, when you actually see the kind of hell, if these are the defenders that we're looking at that are getting stricken so bad and wounded, the amount of hell they're going under, and they do have the option of surrender. At any point, these units could just surrender to the Russians, and it'd be all over for them. And the fact that they don't, it tells you a lot about the kind of people these are. These are brave people right here. The kind of people that you don't see often. As you can see, the firefighting continues all around the plant. We can see vehicles moving through the village area. We can see what appeared to be an abandoned tank. And now we can see a decent amount of damage being inflicted on the steel plant itself, as it appears that the defenders are now hiding within it. We do know that this is Ukrainian. This is a Humvee, which the Russians do not have any of. We can also see something here. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Looks like it may be Ukrainians surrendering. I believe it is. I'm not sure if this is all the defenders at the steel plant, but nonetheless, you got to commend them for the amount of hell they went under and the amount of time they've held that city. Because everyone's going to go, oh, they surrendered, But the thing is you got to imagine, they've been there for around 50 days now under that kind of hellish bombardment and firefighting for 50 straight days, about a month and a half. And for them to surrender just now in that video, you've got to give them credit. That was a long time that they went through hell on earth before they surrendered. And so, got to hand it to them, even though those guys surrendered, they have done a great service to their country. And so hopefully they won't be mistreated under Russian, being a Ukrainian prisoner now. And so with that, we're going to move on from that footage to the next bit of news, where we've seen the TikTok army in mortal danger. And you can actually hear that their tone in this video has changed drastically from all the other videos we've ever seen them in. In this one, they sound scared as hell, and that's because for the first time ever, they've actually come under fire. I don't even know why they uploaded this, but nonetheless, here's the video. So you can see that they are freaking out. And so we know that the TikTok army actually hasn't been in a lot of firefights, because now that they actually are kind of caught in some kind of surprise and an ambush, they're not so cool and collected anymore. They look like they're in absolute panic mode. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news. Well, actually Mariupol news, where we've seen T-72s supporting the Chechens in Mariupol. So without further ado, here's that footage. So you see that the tank is apparently firing into the buildings up there ahead. So you see that they just continue to fire. It is a lengthy video, so I'm going to skip forward a little bit. We see the tank is still sitting there, firing into the same building. Of course not being fired at, and it is presenting its side, it seems, in this video, which of course is something you wouldn't do if there was enemy infantry further down that way.
Единственный шанс у них остался это если могут убежать, то убегут на завод. На заводе мы вас схватим.
You can see the tank fired again. I'm going to move on to fire it again. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Now we can see that they're showing the destruction that they've caused in the battle for the city. Now we can hear what sounds like the tank backing up. Looks like a T-72B. So not one of Russia's best. Now we can see this guy. You know, he wants to be a TikTok star, but once he actually comes under fire, he'll freak out like the guys in the other video.
Вперед, только вперед. Давай, гордовой, конечно, зачем пломбой, зачем вырастет-то?
And so with that, we're actually going to cut the video short because it's just nothing but this goofy guy's commentary. You know, they want to act all cool and stuff, but when you actually see them come under fire, they freak out because they don't actually expect it. So we're now going to move on to the last two bits of news that we've gotten in the Mariupol area, which is, of course, more Chechen footage. Unfortunately, I have to mute it due to copyrighted music. But anyways, here's the video. As you can see, there was a little bit of the copyrighted music. They're driving through destroyed parts of the town. Now they're, of course, standing around something, acting like they're planning or operating a drone. In the usual propaganda-style fashion, they always show this. Now we see a tank firing down the street. We can now see them observing that on a drone. Moving on to armored vehicle, armored car footage. Now we can see some people running around in the rubble. Not really sure whose side that is. Now we can see them sitting around a table, calling in stuff on the radio. And what's really interesting in this video is that they're really making no pretenses that the Chechens are actually sitting a little bit behind the lines using a drone and calling out what they need hit to a tank crew, from what it seems in the first part of the video, which is an interesting bit of info that we've seen. We now see them moving around in the rubble again. Now we see more footage. Apparently someone threw a grenade outside. I don't know. Then someone threw like a tea kettle. I know it wasn't a tea kettle. It looked like maybe a smoke grenade. But nonetheless, now you can see them standing there and talking. They're now moving out of the building. And I don't even know what that was. I can't even explain what happened there. So now we see them firing over green fence with an AT weapon. Building on fire in the distance. Not really sure how the fire started. It would once again be a lot of assumptions. And so with that, that is the end of that video. And I'm finally going to show y'all a picture we've been able to find of the faces of the Azov defenders who are currently inside of the Azovstal, at least a few of them. And these are the brave men who have held that city for 50 days and have continued to hold throughout the making of this video. These people right here, every single one of them, are defenders and heroes of Ukraine. There's really no way to get around that. They have been holding for a time that no one believed possible. And it's just unbelievable to think that these people, who were probably very average people before the war, you know, probably had some kind of normal job, they have stepped up to this extraordinary goal, this impossible task of holding the city of Mariupol, and they've not only made it possible, but they have done it for 50 days. And so I have to give a lot of credit to them. These people are some kind of people. So make sure to remember their faces and know that these are the faces of average people who step up and become the heroes of Ukraine in a way. And so with that, we've reached the end of the news in Mariupol for today. Of course, the city is holding. We don't know for how long, and we don't know how many defenders are left, but we do know that they have been fighting their hardest to hold that city, and they deserve all the credit due to them in the world for doing such a thing. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the rest of the news in the Eastern Front, which we've only gotten one, which is Ukrainians destroying Russian vehicles with some kind of artillery fire, it seems. It looks like they were actually dug in on the side of the road, but without further ado, here's the video. So we can see that we're just watching the vehicles, and now we can see the first hit exploding on what looks like a KAMAZ truck, perhaps. Now we see a Russian run out of his dugout up here further up. Now it looks like he's going for cover. Now we see a Russian kind of running out of the smoke in a way. I don't know how close he was to the explosion, but now he's running back over here. It looks like they're all running over here. I'm not really sure if they have some spot that they've designated as some kind of decent cover, or they may just be running away in general because they haven't stopped yet. They're still going. And so with that, that is the end of that video. We can see the Ukrainians got a pretty good hit on one of the Russian vehicles, and then it looks like everyone just got up and ran. So very interesting to see. And with that, we're now going to move on to the last bits of news we've gotten from Romania and also from the rest of the country. We'll start off in Lviv first, where we've seen a caliber flying over the countryside near Lviv, it seems. So I'm going to let you all see this footage. It is showing that the Russians are committing cruise missile attacks and ballistic missile attacks on the civilian populace again. And so let me rewind it to the start. You can see the caliber right up there where my mouse cursor is. You see it flying over the police checkpoint and towards its target. Very similar to the videos we used to see very often, and I just hate to know what the end result of that will be. But there is good news out there, as Romania has pledged that they will give their MiG-21s, the updated and modernized MiG-21s they have, to Ukraine. This will help bolster their Air Force to a small degree. I don't know how many modernized MiGs they have, but it is an incredible gesture that they're actually handing over their MiG-21s to the Ukrainians. And so with that, we've reached the end of today's news, and so we're now going to return to the questions. I once again want to thank everyone so much for their support before we go into this. It does help us to run this channel, and if you would like to get something else supporting the channel rather than just a question answer, we do have a merch store, which has a link in the description below. And so with that, we're going to move on to the questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $50 donation from Al M. Thank you very much for that generous donation. He says, "Hey, hi again, and great job. Would the Voice of Ukraine be a good charity? Getting the truth out finally on Discord as the Alamo, a 62-year-old Navy vet, and a techie. There's great info here. Can or will Ukraine move new heavy artillery by rail past Dnipro or south?"
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Unfortunately, I don't talk about Ukrainian troop movements because if I am accurate with those statements, it may give the Russians the upper hand. So unfortunately, I can't really answer that question because sometimes I get things dead on. And, you know, if there's Russians watching, they can maybe relay that information somewhere. But I do thank you very much for the support. And unfortunately, I'm not really sure if we would be able to do Voice of Ukraine, because the thing is that we can only do charities under the YouTube GuideStar.org program. And so if they don't have an EIN number based out of the GuideStar program, we unfortunately cannot do it at all. So we're kind of limited in that regard with what we can do. But I do thank you very much for the support, and we will eyeball a non-profit like that if we can. But if we can't, we do have a couple of ideas in mind right now. So I thank you once again for the support. Hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up is a $20 donation from longtime channel supporter DC90, who says, "Hey guys, always happy to support the channel. I do not know if you already have covered it, but Russia was reporting earlier that there was a strike against an airbase on the Ukrainian-Russian border, destroying many Russian aircraft."
Well, thank you very much for the support, and unfortunately, I have not heard that news. So if it is true, try and send it over to me, because I know that you and me have actually been talking a little bit on Discord, and once again, I thank you very much for the support. But if you would like to send over that info to me so I could take a good look at it, I would love to. I think someone sent today, they said it was video footage of the Moskva sinking, and it actually didn't look like the same class. So I always like to make sure that I verify information sometimes instead of taking it for granted because I think that the Russians wouldn't like to admit something like that. But nonetheless, if you do have the link, make sure to share it with me because I would love to see it and maybe include it in tomorrow's news. So I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up is a $20 donation from Don Beal, who says the videos we see out of Mariupol show the incompetence of the TikTok battalion. Example, they can't even operate rifles. Why can't the Ukrainians get resupply and reinforcements in there? Do they consider it a lost cause?
I don't think they consider it a lost cause. Zelensky actually says that the fate of the war relies on Mariupol, and so I don't think they view it as a lost cause. But I think the fact is that since they have to cover some, let me check real quick. Come on, don't do that to me. Let's see here. Some 30 miles to get to the city. It's not that they consider it a lost cause or they're scared of the TikTok army. It's just that they're scared of having to try and cover so much ground to get to the city and reinforce it in the first place. And that the process of trying to provide reinforcements may be the lost cause in a way. Not necessarily the city, but the actual avenue that they'd have to take to get there. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And next up is a $15 donation from Turbo B18C1 again. He says, someone in the chat said to make a Moscow Mike mug since he dead now. Shut up and take my money.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, man. And we have been thinking about doing Moscow Mike merch. It's just that the thing is that we don't want to like overdo the merch in a way, like the limited edition stuff, because it'd be a limited edition run. And so we do have some ideas of doing that in the future, but we don't want to do it too soon. We kind of want, we don't really want to like over flood the limited edition thing and make a limited edition not really feel limited, if you know what I'm saying. So I thank you so much for the support, and we will look into it. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, I want to recognize a $5 donation from Simon Gardner. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. Next up, we have a $5 donation from Brian K., who says, it seems more and more like this war is mirroring the Winter War, not only an unexpected Ukrainian resistance, but also the lack of Russian leadership.
Yes, I've actually been saying that since the start of this war. I haven't been saying it often now because, you know, for a lot of my return audience, I don't want to rehash the same stuff every night and sound like a broken record. But it does resemble the Finnish Winter War in a lot of ways, specifically logistically, because logistically in the Winter War, the Russians went with the most overcomplicated logistical scheme that they could come up with, much like, excuse me, they have done in this war, where they've had multiple different supply hubs supplying totally different kind of like areas of the front line, which overcomplicates the logistical system and makes it incredibly difficult to actually effectively field and supply the armies that you're using in the war. So I thank you so much for the support, and I do entirely agree that it does resemble the Winter War in a lot of ways, and in those two ways that you mentioned, especially with the command structure of the Russian military, it highly resembles the inefficient command structure of the Soviet military during the Winter War. So I thank you very much once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I want to recognize a $5 donation from Martin Nielsen. Thank you very much for that donation. Next up, we have a $5 donation from Ernie Tech, who says, glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine and Slava Ukraini. And with that being said, on to the next question.
And next up is a $5 donation from longtime channel supporter George, New York's premier contractor, who says, I don't think May 9th parade will take part. What do you think?
Oh, the May 9th parade has got to happen. They've never missed the May 9th parade ever. I think the only exception to that was when the Soviet Union collapsed and it became the Russian Federation. I think they had a hard time doing it for like 1 or 2 years, but after that they managed to get that thing going on again. They didn't even stop it for COVID, which everyone was freaking out about, and the Russians did kind of like a limited parade that year, but still they did a parade. And I know that they're not going to miss out on that. That's a huge propaganda thing for them. They literally can never stop doing that, I don't think. So I think they will still try and do it. It's just that we're going to see a lot less misses in this parade specifically, and probably no T90s. So I thank you very much for the support. You've been a return supporter, and it does mean a lot, and it does help us to run this channel. And so with that being said, I hope I answered the question, at least as far as what I think about what's probably going to happen with the May 9th parade. And with that being said, how many super chats do we have left?
Let's see. We have about 10 left.
All right. And with that being said, on to the next question.
And I want to recognize a $5 donation from Paul Ashwin. Thank you very much, Paul, for your support. Next up, we have a $5 donation from longtime channel supporter Wolfgang Zavago, who says, in the upcoming Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol fight in Las Vegas, should the Russian anthem be played? Also, whatever happened to Pavel?
Oh man, Pavel was a long time ago. But what happened to Pavel? This wasn't ever confirmed, but we had a lot of evidence to suggest that he was actually not in Ukraine and he was trying to run some kind of a scheme in a way. And so we had to we got rid of him off of everything. That was a long time ago. Like a month and a week ago or so. But that's what happened to Pavel. Because his story didn't add up, you see, because he told us in a call, we were all in a call with him back when there was like loads of mods and stuff. And he said, "Oh, I'm right here on the front lines right now. I can go talk to my CO." And then he told another person the day before that he had been shot and he was being rushed to a military hospital. So it's like, there was contradicting stories there. And we didn't really believe him anymore after a point because just a lot of the story didn't really add up at all. But to move on to the first part of that question, could you tell me the first part of that question again real quick, Matthew, to make sure I cover it correctly?
Yeah, basically, there's a fight coming up in Las Vegas between Canelo Alvarez and Dmitry Bivol. He just basically wants to know, should the Russian anthem be played at that fight?
Nah, I don't think the Russian anthem should be played anywhere. If there's any kind of control over if it is or isn't. The Russians are an aggressor. They're governmentally, they're an incredibly terrible country, and the anthem kind of represents the country and the government in a way. So I would not have it played at the next bout of fighting in Las Vegas. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope I have addressed both of those questions in a way. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $5 donation from longtime channel supporter Lilith Embers, who says, DNR is part of Ukraine that Russia has been fighting over since 2014, not a separate country. I've been here since day 3.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you very much for sharing the info. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another one from George, New York's premier contractor, who says 8,000 watching and 1,000 likes. Come on, guys, and hit the like button.
Yeah, come on, hit the like button. Y'all don't know how much hitting the like button helps out this channel as far as its reach. Usually we get something like it's actually a pretty small percentage of likes compared to the overall views on the video. And if we can manage to get that percentage up higher, YouTube will push the video to more people. And so if y'all do like the quality of news we deliver, a great way to help out the channel instead of giving like a super chat or anything like that is to just hit the like button. It helps us out a load, and I appreciate everyone who does it every single day. And so I thank y'all all so much for the support, and thank you New York's premier contractor for bringing that up again. And I do thank you very much for the return support. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $5 donation from William Allen, who says, whoop.
Whoop. Thank you very much for the support, and whoop. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I want to recognize an $18 donation from David Williams. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. And next up, we have a $5 donation from longtime channel supporter Caffeine, who says, Patrick Lancaster is a Russian propaganda agent.
Well, I thank you very much for sharing the info. I'll have to look into that. I don't really watch a lot of YouTube channels. I did a little bit a few days ago. I went and watched like Funker and a whole bunch of other people for a bit and tried to like cross-reference what I was saying compared to what they were saying for the first time ever. But I thank you very much for sharing that info with us. I don't really know if that's true or not. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of seeming a little pressed to answer the questions tonight. For some reason, I'm feeling a little hot. Like hot in the way where you get like the sick kind of heats. So I don't know what this is, but please bear with me. So I hope I've answered that in a pretty good way. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just real quickly, I just want to mention that that's kind of odd. The enforcer mentions he's feeling hot because I actually have a very high fever right now and I'm not feeling too well. Hopefully it's not the COVID, but hopefully we didn't come in contact with anything when we were out filming yesterday, but who knows? But anyways, moving on to the next question, we have a $5 donation from Rob Scott. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel. We very much appreciate it. Next up, we have a $5 donation from Polar Doom 420, who who says, "Shout out to Ryan. Appreciate you guys and all your effort. Can't wait till my Leaf Spring mug arrives. Many, many prayers to Ukraine."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it is the mugs are pretty neat. We got another mug. We get all the mugs. I'm trying to collect them all whenever we do a limited edition run and put them in a case or something like that. But I've gotten the Enforcer mug, the normal logo one, and we also have the Leaf Spring mug on the way here too. So I hope that you do enjoy it. The Enforcer mug itself, like the normal one that's black, is pretty cool. I mean, like, not gonna lie, it's a very nicely made mug, and I really like it a lot. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope I addressed that comment in a pretty good way. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Simon Gardner, who says, "Enforcer, they should hit the existing forces hard in the east while they are bogged down and blow up bridges close to the border to stall the invasion and stopping reinforcements."
I can't agree. I don't think the Ukrainian Air Force has the ability or the size anymore to actually conduct over the lines attacks on bridges and infrastructure further behind the Russian lines. But I do think that the Ukrainians are trying to conduct some counterattacks at the moment, whether they be limited or very large in scope for them. I'm not entirely sure. But hopefully they can manage to try and thwart the attack that will be probably coming from Izyum very soon. And so I do agree that they should probably try and preemptively strike this time and throw the Russians off balance instead of letting them try and take the initiative in a way. But I thank you very much for the support. Hope that does address the comment in a way. And so with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, who is a longtime channel supporter, who says, "Looks to me that Ukrainian morale is solid and Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraini, and I can't agree that the morale is high, and especially after they sunk the Moskva, because that is a huge deal. I mean, like, there's no way that you can say that is a huge deal, and there's really not even a reason to explain it, because sinking a flagship of a fleet is a very rare event, and it's a massive occasion, especially for morale and for, like, the actual celebration of the fact. So I thank you so much for the support. Hope that does address that in a way. And so with that being said, on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from William Allen again, who says, "Whoop is an Aggie thing. Just wanted to hear someone from Alabama say it as a Troy history grad, and you and the mods are great."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you did get to hear one of us say whoop. And so I thank you very much for the support once again. It does mean a lot, does help us to run this channel. And with that being said, on to the next question.
And next up here is another one from Simon Gardner, who says, "Enforcer, the Ukrainians surrendering will be shot. It's better to die fighting."
I'm not entirely sure if they're all being shot, because we do know that some prisoner exchanges have been conducted, which tells us that some Ukrainian prisoners are being kept alive, or maybe most of them. But I do agree that it is better for the Ukrainians to keep fighting, because the question of what the Russians will actually do to them, especially the defenders in Mariupol, considering that they're trying to paint all of them as fascist, is incredibly questionable. And it does show the fact that they may actually execute them on the site and say that there's some kind of criminals or something like that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I can kind of agree with that in certain instances. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $5 donation from Paul Plonsky, who says, "Enforcer, is Putin just gaslighting in your opinion, or could he actually attack the USA with mainland with nukes? Slava Ukraine."
It's mostly gaslighting in a way, and thank you for the support. The Russians really don't have the ability to do much. I mean, like, if you look at their military performance, imagine how well off their nuclear arsenal is. I'm assuming that it's probably really poor off, because they really don't even have a budget to maintain a modern or incredibly impressive military from at least their performance so far in Ukraine. So I think it's mostly kind of like empty threats. I don't really think they have a way to back them up. But well, of course, you know, a nuke is a nuke, and if a nuke can be launched and operational, it is, of course, a devastating weapon. But I don't really think that it's something they can really carry through on. And if the West was to fire nuclear weapons at Russia, that would be much more of a devastating thing for the Russians than them firing nukes at the Western world as a whole. So I thank you very much for the support, but that's kind of my assessment of the nuclear situation in a nutshell. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Sea Dog Pirate, who says, "The game dev of Ostriv is still alive in Ukraine. You should buy the game, or others should buy it. It's another way to support Ukraine."
And what was the game again?
Dev of Ostriv.
I think I'll look into that. I do play games in my free time, however much free time I've got. But I thank you very much for the support and letting us know about that. I will look into it and might get the game if I can. So I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from RDY4THDLL, who says, "Can the Ukraine army nullify the assault from the sea?"
I don't think there will be an assault from the sea because Odessa is being protected by anti-ship missiles right now, and we do know that they just sank the Moskva. And if they're able to sink the Moskva, which is the most capable ship of pretty much deterring any kind of attack on itself, I don't think they'll be as confident in launching a naval invasion and having to pass through pretty much like 110 miles of open sea where they could be targeted by anti-ship missiles. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 donation from Graham Thomas, who says, "Thanks for your work."
And I thank you so much for supporting it. It does help us a lot, and it helps us to continue to run this channel. Once again, kind of go over the philosophy of the super chats. If you do enjoy the content and you want us to keep on doing this, super chats are the only way that we support this channel at the moment, besides the merch. So we run absolutely no ads on these videos because I don't like ads, one, and two, if you get on here and you don't enjoy it, I really don't want anyone to lose any skin. You can just leave and you've really lost nothing rather than a little bit of your time. But if you do enjoy it, you can, of course, support it. So I thank y'all so much for the support once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have one from Ash Scott, who says, "The like button sends a Stugna, a Russian tank, away."
Well, not entirely, but I do like what you're saying. Make sure to hit the like button, everyone, if you do enjoy what you're watching. And so I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Eric O, who says, "Besides Putin's claim of Nazis in NATO, what is Russia's goal? Regional domination, control of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, economic stability, etc."
Can you rephrase that one for me real quick, Matthew?
So basically, he was listing off some options of Putin's goal. Is it regional domination, control of the Eastern Orthodox Christianity, or economic stability?
Yes. Well, the simple answer is strategic dominance. Well, not really strategic dominance, but strategic stability in the region. Because right now, as you can see highlighted here in blue, this is the current NATO front line with pro-Russian countries like Belarus and Russia itself. If NATO was to, if Ukraine was to join NATO, this blue front line would then stretch across all of northern Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, and all the way down towards Rostov-on-Don. So pretty much the NATO front line would expand by a factor of 2 within a day of Ukraine joining NATO. So it's really a strategic interest to make sure that that front line does not get extended. So I believe that the Russians would be okay with the Ukraine pledging neutrality as long as it meant that NATO forces wouldn't be able to be on an area of the border twice as long as what they currently possess. So that's really what I'm looking at. I think that's the main goal here. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up here, we have an $8 donation from Jonathan Toe, who says, "How much of an impact would the introduction of Reaper and Predator UAVs have? It has been reported that the USA might be planning on sending them."
I think they would be about as effective as a Bayraktar. Bayraktars and Reapers really kind of do the same purpose. They're built by different countries, and I don't really think there's too much of a difference of them. I know there's about to be someone in the comments who says there's a million differences, and I know technologically they're entirely different, but in terms of their actual function and purpose, they're not. So I think that will really just be bolstering their drone numbers, probably giving a lot of replacements to Bayraktars that they may have lost in the process of this war. So I think really it would just kind of be like them getting more Bayraktars, if I was to just say that in a nutshell. So I hope that answers the question, at least as far as I know, and my opinion on the matter. So I thank you so much for the support. Hope that answers the question. And with that being said, how many super chats do we have left?
We have 5 left.
All right, and with that being said, on to the next one.
And the next one is from Simon Gardner once again. Thank you very much for your continued support of the channel. His next question is, "Saw a vehicle marshalling yard in Crimea. Why don't they attack it, thereby opening an air corridor to supply Mariupol by air?"
Oh, well, the thing is that Mariupol, I don't believe, has an airport. Well, a large one. Let me check it though. Mariupol, city in Ukraine. Well, thank you. I'm glad to know it's a city in Ukraine. Anyways, let's go to layers. Let's see if we can find an airport, an airstrip around here somewhere. Oh boy. There's one. Here's an airport right here. But you see, the thing is that would be so hard for the defenders right now because they are being pushed back to then launch some kind of offensive to go to the airport and then create an air corridor to supply the defenders. On top of that, if they were even able to manage that, this airport would be right on pretty much the front line with the Russians, and the aircraft flying over would probably just be shot down by air defense in a way like Iglas or Tunguskas or Shilkas or something like that. So I don't really think that's exactly a possibility, but it is a decent and interesting idea. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does kind of address the idea in a way, at least as far as what I think may be feasible there. But with that, thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from William Allen again. He says they can fire Hellfire missiles and others.
I did know that, but the thing is like, how much more effective would a Hellfire missile be versus the munitions that a Bayraktar can currently carry? So let's pull that up. Bayraktar drone. Let's take a look at the Bayraktar drone. I'm sure, yeah, Wikipedia article. Let's scroll down. Scroll on a little bit further down. Specifications, armaments. So it can carry guided bombs. It can also carry long-range anti-tank missile systems. Let's see. I think that may be kind of in the same category as a Hellfire. It can carry 70mm missiles. It can also carry laser-guided rockets. Quad rack of 81mm mortars that are guided, and also precision kill weapon systems. I'm not really sure what those are, but nonetheless, we can kind of see that the Bayraktar can carry Hellfire missiles in a way. I know they're not exactly the same kind, but they are long-range anti-tank missile systems, which is pretty much just what a Hellfire is. So I thank you very much for the support. I do think that, of course, American drones would help, but I don't really think they're going to provide too much of a huge difference or a huge advantage over the Bayraktars that the Ukrainians have already managed to get from the Turks. But I thank you so much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I want to recognize a $2 donation from Uper Jim. Thank you very much for your support. Next up, we have a $2 donation from Honest M, who says Moscow has been promoted to the submarine fleet.
I like that joke. That's a pretty good one. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's been promoted to the artificial reef segment of the Black Sea Fleet, which is brand new, and they're still working on expanding that part of the fleet. So I thank you so much for the support. That was a pretty good joke. I liked it. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from Reflection, who says Russian bots all over the chat tonight and getting bad. And yes, I have to agree with that. The bots have been quite heavy tonight. Nightbot's been hard at work getting rid of them, and so have I. So hopefully we've gotten rid of most of them by now, but there might be a few sticking around. But next up, we have a $2 donation from William Allen once again. He says, because the video quality is better.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that could be a thing that may help out a decent bit. So I guess that is one advantage that the Reaper drone may have over the Bayraktar, but then again, I'm not exactly an expert on both of them, so I don't know if the video quality is better on it or not. But if it is, then that is one advantage that the Reaper drone does have over the Bayraktar system. So I thank you so much for sharing that with us once again, and I thank you for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the last super chat of the night goes to Kalir, who puts in a $5 donation, and says, why is there so many lone tanks and other units? Seems like they want to be easy pickings.
I think it's because the Russians are just poorly trained in how to actually fight. Because we've been seeing that since the opening of the war. We've seen like 30 tank long columns with no infantry support getting picked off from the air since day one. So I think it's really honestly just poor training or poor implementation of actual doctrine that's leading to that, because we've seen that ever since the beginning of the war, and it's just a recurring thing that makes the Russians just look incredibly goofy as far as how they're fighting this war. It's like a whole bunch of amateurs or people who never even had any kind of training, and they just got the weapons and were told, okay, go out there and fight for Russia or something like that. But I thank you very much for the support. I hope that kind of addresses that in a short way. And I want to apologize to everyone once again that if the answers have been a little lacking tonight, it is because right now I actually feel like my stomach is spinning knots around itself right now. So please bear with me on that. But I do thank you all once again for your support, and I hope you all did get something out of my answers in a way. And so with that, we're now going to move on to a couple of questions from the live chat, about 3, and then we're going to wrap up this stream for the night. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And real quick, I just want to recognize one more super chat that just came in from Chris Kaufman Jr. of $5. He says, "Can we airdrop supplies into the city?"
Maybe, but that's one other thing that you'd have to consider is where would the supplies land? They could get snagged on the side of a building, which would make them impossible to get. They may drift over if they're dropped by parachute onto the Russian side. And so, you know, the question there is, could the airdrops be accurately placed where they actually land within Ukrainian lines and actually in a spot where they can access them? So I think it may be a possibility. It would be incredibly risky, though, and the Ukrainians don't have a lot of transport aircraft in a way, so I'm not entirely sure if that would be possible, but it is, of course, something that may be looked into in the future, although I'm not really sure if the Ukrainians have already looked into it and shot that idea down themselves. But thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And so with that, we're going to go, we're going to have a cutoff here for all the super chats, and we're going to get to 3 questions from the normal chat, and then we're going to cut the stream, we're going to end the stream for the night. And so with that being said, what is the first question we've gotten from the chat?
And real quick, I'm noticing a lot of people saying that hopefully the enforcer hasn't been poisoned by the FSB. That might be a little bit of a stretch. Hopefully not, but it's probably something a lot more simpler, like maybe COVID or something like that. But let's hope it's nothing serious. But anyways, moving on to the first question from the live chat here, we have is from Don Beal, who says, "Enforcer, why can't the Ukrainians take material from the Elephant's Foot, weaponize a dirty bomb, and then release it over Belgorod or Kursk? I think that would be more disruptive than frowned upon."
Well, I thank you very much for the question. It's an interesting one. But the thing is that the elephant's foot has actually lost a large amount of its radioactivity. And also, I don't think it's pure radioactive elements. I think it's like some kind of mix of steel and concrete and stuff like that that just melted down into the basement of the reactor. But it's lost most of its radioactivity recently, and that's why, if you ever notice, there are pictures of people who got right up on the thing and started taking pictures of it. So I don't think that would be effective, but if that was something that was possible, that would be a really weird thing for them to do, but it would be something for the books for sure. So I hope that kind of addresses that in a way. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and real quick, I have to recognize a couple of super chats that just came in. We have a $50 donation from J318 Alas and a $20 donation from Cornholio. Thank you both for your very generous donations to the channel, and they are very, very much appreciated. As always, they help us to run the channel. So let's see here. Next up from our live chat, we have a question from Robert Durham, who says, "What do you think the Russian response would be to an operation similar to the Berlin airlift? It would put Russia in a significant bind, especially if all the supplies are non-military."
That is a good question. And he's talking about air supplying Mariupol, isn't he?
Say it one more time.
He's talking about airlifting supplies to Mariupol?
Let's see here. He's just saying, what do you think the Russian response would be if there was an operation like the Berlin airlift? Would it make Russia respond at all?
Yes, it would make Russia respond. They're not going to allow in any supplies of any kind into Mariupol, because we know that a couple of humanitarian convoys have set off towards the city and either been shot at to the point that they had to turn back or destroyed. So they're not going to allow in any supplies at all. And the situation in the Berlin airlift was, of course, different. The United States and the West and the East weren't at war during the time. They were in like a tense standoff in the Cold War, but there wasn't an actual ground war going on below them. And then the U.S. is like, hey, we're going to fly planes into Berlin, which is way behind Soviet lines, well, East German lines, and we're going to try and supply the West German Berliners that way. And then the Russians were like, dang it, they got us. It wasn't really like that. Well, you know, the situation now isn't like that one. The situation right now is that they're in the middle of a war, and they're probably going to shoot down anything that tries to conduct an airlift anywhere. So I hope that does answer the question. And it was a very interesting question. It's just that I don't really think airlifts are practical, and especially with the size of the air fleet that the Ukrainians have. They have a very, very small amount of transport aircraft, and all of them are medium to small size. So I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the night. And so who is the lucky person who got in the last question?
So real quick before I move on to the last one, I just want to mention something that I told a user that I would mention. This is a comment from Shenanigans, who wanted me to inform you that the appropriate response to Slava Ukraine is, I hope I'm not butchering this, Heroim Slava, if you weren't aware of that already.
It's Heroim Slava, yeah.
There we go.
Not Heroin Slava. Yeah, but I saw that actually. I saw that a while ago. I thank you very much for saying that. I actually didn't know that. I thought you could just respond the same way. I've seen a lot of people say that on the videos as well. Like they'll say Slava Ukrainian, and someone else will say that in response, and then sometimes they say Heroim Slava. But I do thank you very much for sharing that with me. It is something good to know, and I'll try and keep that in mind next time I say that. So with that being said, who was the lucky person who got in the last question of the night?
So the final question of the night goes to Charles Scott, who says, Enforcer, is there any way to know the current roundabout locations of all or any of our U.S. carrier strike groups? And do you think the U.S. would even need to use more than one to clear Ukraine?
I don't think they'd have to use more than one. The power that a single American aircraft carrier can field at a single time is actually incredibly high. So I don't think they would need more than one. But of course, the United States and any smart country would always go on the side of overkill, and they probably have two carrier task groups assigned to clearing out Ukrainian airspace if they wanted to do that. But unfortunately, I don't really know of any way you can actually track the location of U.S. carrier fleets. Of course, it's probably not confidential. A lot of people want to act like, oh, you never know. But obviously, they're probably seeing some kind of maritime traffic out there at sea, and so there's like a cargo ship that's passing them, and they're like, oh look, it's a carrier group. You can see like the screening ships right there, and probably out way past the horizon is the carrier itself. So I think there is a way. Unfortunately, I just don't know about it. Hopefully someone in the live chat can enlighten us all if there is a website that actually just tells you where the carrier groups were known to be heading. But with that, I hope I answered that question pretty well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I'm sorry that this one may have not been as high energy as the others. I'm not really feeling all too well. Hopefully this can subside for tomorrow, because if I feel like this tomorrow or worse, oh man, it's going to be a nightmare. But I do thank you all so much for watching, and I thank you all so much for supporting the channel. We do run streams every single day at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and I hope that y'all do all come back tomorrow, because tomorrow will be our fundraising day, and we will pick out a fundraiser that is currently operating inside of Ukraine and help them help the Ukrainians. And so I thank you all once again, and I'll see y'all all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.